you are listening to the Footy Mailbag podcast with Damo and Clarky.
Hello and welcome to the Footy Mailbag. My name is Damo. Clarky is out with illness, so helping me sitting in the co-host chair this week is Stephen from SDS SuperCoach. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thank you, Damo, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on, of course. Good to be back, so thank you so much. And so we're heading to the bye rounds. It's a bit of a tricky period for some super coaches, and not some super coaches, a lot of super coaches. There's a lot of planning and big decisions to make as we finalise our sites, so it'll be a very good chat.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned there that it's the first bye round, first mid-season bye round of the season. Sydney, North Melbourne, Brisbane, and the Giants all on a bye this week. So the likes of your Isaac Heaney's, Lachie Neale, Josh Dunkley, Luke Davies-Uniacke, Tristan Sherry, Zach Fisher, Harry Sheasel, all those sorts of players are unavailable this week due to their team's buys. So don't put them on field. Don't expect a score from them.
Exactly. I mean, I think basically, the best way possible is just to hope that some of your bench lads can get a game and step up for you during these bye rounds, because this is when we need them most. Whether they're going to be cash cows or not, we just need bodies on the field. And as we look to, in a best 18, it's best 18 over the next month. So basically during most of the June period. So, we'll just be having a hope that we can get 18 on field or more each week.
And this week and next week will probably be a little bit easier for most, given that there's 4 and 2 rather than the full complement of 6 teams.
Yeah.
But it's the 2 following weeks where we might see some maneuvers where people go for players that have already had their buys so they can get 18, 19, 20 on field. So their best 18 really is a best 18 and not just the 18 that they're left with.
Exactly. And I think it'll also test people as well with obviously how well they've managed the bye rounds throughout the year, because I think a lot of people would have planned for the opening rounds with the bye rounds in there, but then sort of just going, all right, easy. I can enjoy best 22 for a few weeks, and then, crap, we got more bye rounds. So be interested to see people's planning. I think certain coaches who may have gotten a couple of too many players from their favourite team might be punished. So it's all about sort of planning, and we've now hit it, and I guess, we just got to see how things play out.
So with planning comes trading, and when you do your trading, rookies are really, really important. But where are the rookies?
Not much to be seen. I mean, we've only got, so this is really sort of that awkward period where there was one main rookie on the bubble in Will Dawson, but he's a North Melbourne player, and North Melbourne have the bye, so he won't be playing this week. He does come in with a very handy defensive forward status. So before the mid-season draft players have been added, he seems to be the cheapest cheapest guy with defensive forward status. So that will interest a lot of people, especially with guys like Zach Fisher, that sort of type. So there's not much. I mean, if anyone just went Joe Richards, you'll be looking at guys like Joel Freeger from the Dogs, be looking at blokes like Kane McAuliffe, even Lachie Sullivan. So you'll have to pay up a bit of money if you want a rookie this week, unless you want a donut, basically.
Something that caught my eye this week when I was having a good look at who's available, and I'm not endorsing this pick, but it's just something that interested me just because he'd come down that far in price. Camden McIntosh at Richmond is 194k, but he has been flirting with the sub-vest a little too much this season for me to be comfortable bringing him in even at that price. So I wouldn't go there, but just interesting to see him come down that far in price, and just shows how much a sub-vested game can really plummet your price. So players like him, David Swallow, we've seen in recent weeks come down to below 200k and really tempt a few people, but they've come down in price because they've had that sub-vest a little too close to them lately. And I wouldn't endorse picking up a Camden McIntosh, but I do get that there are no rookies, so sometimes they might be the best option. You just have to cross your fingers and toes that they don't get the sub vest again soon. And I mean, Camden McIntosh, he's a premiership player for the Tigers, and brings a heap of experience to their team where they need it most at the moment. So who knows? Maybe he does get an extended run, getting a full allotment of game time. But just until we can be sure that he's going to have a full allotment of game time, I just don't think he's a good player to bring in at all, really. But let's move on, because just tonight, just now, the mid-season draft has just completed. There were 19 picks in total. So with that comes a few 102k guys. Bryn Teakle, Ned Long were picked up again. So they'll have elevated prices based on their previous outputs. But there are players that are going to be making an instant impact, or a pretty close to instant impact for their clubs. On the thefootymailbag.net website, we will have a wrap of all 19 picks with stats from their last few state games, if we can find the stats, how we rank them in terms of SuperCoach relevancy, whether we think that they will play straight away or not, and the type of player that you can sort of compare them to in the AFL. And top of the list for a player that's probably going to come in straight away is St Kilda's pick, Max Hall. He's a mature age midfielder, loves to float forward, loves to kick a goal, probably gives them something in their midfield that they don't really have in Zach Jones, Brad Crouch, Jack Steele. Probably gives them a bit of athleticism through there that's not a Liam Henry, not a Paddy Dow, who are probably more outside players.
Yeah, absolutely. And he played for obvious Box Hill Hawks, of course. So, and he was a mega part of played some ripping games down at Box Hill this year and also last year. A little bit older, so I think usually as well as St Kilda is that if Ross can identify a guy that he thinks can make an instant impact, and he can instantly be that sort of play can instantly become one of his favourites. So it does add a little bit more flair to that St Kilda midfield if they do look to add him in straight away. So it's a good story and great result for Max, and maybe someone we keep in mind. My guess would be these are mid/forward, but they might just make him purely as a mid.
Some of these players may not play straight away, but at 102k with potentially some DPP, they might become useful just for their swing set with another player that you have in your team. So just because they haven't necessarily been selected or don't look like they will be selected doesn't mean they are totally irrelevant. You wouldn't want to stack your team with players that aren't looking like they're going to play. Other players that have been selected that will probably get some early opportunities at some point over the next few weeks. Geordie Payne was the first pick selected by North Melbourne. He's across half back in his draft year, but has moved forward. So he's a bit of an everywhere man, but sounds like North want to use him in that small forward type role. Jacob Blight is a mature age intercepting key defender from Peel. I think he's going to come in almost instantly because of the likes of Josh Gibcus and now Tyler Young going down with their ACL injuries, and probably gives them a little more flexibility with what they do with Noah Bolter as well. Jack Hutchinson comes out of Collingwood's VFL to West Coast. He's another one to keep an eye on. And then we've spoken about Max Hall as well. So the first 4 picks in the draft are probably the most relevant here. And then Will McLaughlin went to Brisbane. Kelsey Ripstra went to the Western Bulldogs. We know Bevo loves a mid-season pick. Saad El Hawley at Essendon. If he wasn't selected by Essendon, I'd probably have more faith in him getting a go more like straight away. But we've seen with the likes of Sam Durham and we've seen with the likes of Sam Durham
and Massimo and
yep. They love to bring in these guys to have an instant impact. So keep an eye on that. Sydney opened up a list spot right at the last minute and selected Tom Hanley. There's every chance that he takes the Sam Wicks spot in that Sydney side. Sam Wicks isn't really friends with Sydney Swans players at the moment, so he could come straight in after the bye and have an instant impact in that role as well. And then Ned Long got picked up by Collingwood, and he's going to come in at an elevated price after a few games at Hawthorn, but someone to keep an eye on as well. Collingwood also selected a player by the name of Ilaro Smith. Great name. Love the name. But come across a website that he's put together. He calls himself Big Roo, and it says a new breed of ruckman. Love the confidence. He wants to be the best ruckman in the league, not just hit outs wise, but around the ground too. He looks 12 and 32 at the same time somehow. And he also likes mountain bike riding and music production. So, he's put his whole resume on display for everyone. And, well, you got to admire the confidence from Big Roo, as we should be calling him now, I guess.
Yes, and he is, to my knowledge at the minute, the second most healthy ruckman at Collingwood at the minute, just due to a lot of ruck injuries. So I think if Darcy Cameron ended up going down, I think he comes in straight away and he gets to put his highlights package at AFL level onto his website. But best of luck to him. We love the confidence and we'll just see how he goes. My guess would be that he's just, I think Collingwood just looked at the ruck situation at the minute with Cox down and with Mason Cox out. And I think best of luck to him, I reckon. Not sure how relevant he's going to be with SuperCoach, but maybe if Darcy Cameron went down, we can talk about his mountain biking and music production in another footy mailbag, I'm sure.
He's someone that I'd really like to have in my team just because of his name. I don't know if he would play. I don't know if he'd be any good at scoring, but the name alone is attractive enough. But like I said, you don't want too many of those sorts of players that aren't playing, especially using trades to get them in. If you were building your starting team again and he was there, maybe it's a different story. But
would be a good vibes pick.
Yeah, a good vibes pick. Let's get to the listener questions. So I had on the run sheet, should we be trading this week? And Tim has asked that exact question. Is holding trades this week acceptable? And Tim, I'm here to tell you I am probably holding my trades this week. There's nowhere for me to go with any of the players I want to get rid of because there are no rookies around. And I don't want to go early on Will Dawson and then him not end up playing next week. So unless someone is handed a debut and I feel safe in going early on them because they have dual position status and I can use them as a swing set with someone else, then maybe I might be trading. But at the moment, I don't see myself making a move yet. So completely acceptable not to trade. How do you feel about this, Stephen?
I totally understand that because at the end of the day, it's all team dependent and what you really feel. I'm on the other end because I need to catch up on upgrades, and I'm just really sort of identifying um, because this will be the only week where I bring in because it's such an awkward week to trade because whoever you bring in, there's a buy round coming up over the next months, or they've got to buy this week, so it's really awkward. But for me personally, I just sort of identify a certain buy where, all right, I've got no buy round plays in this line for this week, so I can target that. So, like for me personally, at the minute, I think I've only got 3 premiums at the minute with the round 14 buy. So I'm like, okay, I could probably afford to get another in, and then from next week forward, I can just bring players in off their buy. So look, for me, I'm just prioritizing on upgrading my side and just seeing how we go. But this is very team dependent, and I think it's perfectly fine to hold trades because there's no rookies to go. So, yeah, it's very team dependent.
Yeah, I mean, I still have Darcy Jones on my forward bench, and because I've got Jordan Sweet as well, who is not playing this week.
Yep.
It means I have no cover in my forward line because Cohen Livingston is in my F8 position. So if a debutant pops up that I can move Darcy Jones to bank 80k or whatever it is, then there's every chance that I will go early on a player before they've even played a game just to have that cover, knowing that someone will be scoring. But it's a risky play. I mean, they might come in, be the sub, and then go straight back out. So it depends on the player that comes in. But I mean, these are the sort of the risks you take in the buy rounds. But like you said, whoever you trade in has a buy coming up straight away. And if you trade in someone on the buy now, then who knows if they get selected for the following week in the case of Will Dawson. So completely understand holding trades and completely understand using trades to sort of catch yourself up to where everyone else is if you're a bit behind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I remember last year, like, and I think some people did it as well, which I do regret doing because I got in O'Shane Mullen, who I believe was a game in or making his debut during the buys, and I just wanted him in just to get, a 17th player instead of a 16th player. But sometimes it's not really worth it to get an extra score of 50, and then yeah, you've used a trade on a bloke who you're just stuck with for the whole year, but you just brought him in because it's an extra player for this certain week. So yeah, hopefully the mid-season tr- draft period can certainly help us with a couple of these rookies. Maybe that Richmond key back that they took with at pick 2 can finally be, if Will Dawson is dropped, can finally be a defensive rookie option for us because I don't know about you, Damo. It feels like a very long time. Well, it's been about 7 weeks since the Closey and Graham situation where we just haven't had any defensive rookies to go down to.
Yeah, it's been a long time since a defensive rookie. Like I got Closey, I got Graham. Graham's
Yep.
gone now because he doesn't look like coming back into that team. But I jumped on Josh Draper. I jumped on Sam Closey. Jumped on Will Graham. Started with Zach Reed, who I still own. Essendon, please bring him back. But there hasn't been a lot of options otherwise. And I mean, there was a time earlier in the season where there were people bringing in Darcy Gardner. Not a lot of people brought him in, but there were people that were bringing him in because he was there and breathing. But he's now out injured, and I snuck him in on the traffic lights last week, and people thought I was nuts to put him there, but filling those squares is so hard each week, and I knew that there were some people who did have him, probably moved him by the time by the time that traffic light came out. But that's how desperate we're getting.
Yeah, I remember people also as well. I mean, it could have worked out, but people bring in Riley Hardiman because what was it, about a month ago? That's just how Dial's sort of looking down back. But yeah, it's an interesting time, the buy rounds, because I'm actually in a similar situation to you where we know that Sweet's been dropped. I've got Joe Richards at F8. You've got Darcy Jones, and I've got Livingston at as my other as my other forward bench slot. So I can trade Sweet. I've got Jackson. I can and just bring Livingston back to that R3 and then reassess and use Sweet's money, because I think it's fair to say with Jordan Sweet, he ain't coming back unless there's another injury to Soldo, would be my guess.
And people say that Jordan Sweet is a failed pick, but I don't
No.
actually think that. I don't actually think that. He's doubled his price for us, which is exactly what we want from a rookie.
Yeah.
Especially one with an elevated price tag. So he's not a fail. He's
No.
not, but people brought him in expecting him to get to 450k playing every game until Ivan Soldo came back. Well, it didn't happen, unfortunately.
It did feel like a minor failure to me because he was the sole reason I traded out Rowan Marshall. But anyway, but he still made 160k at the end of the day. It's still been a successful pick, but it has buggered up not only me, I'm sure a lot of other super coaches format with their side. But it's definitely not a failure for Sweet. I mean, any rookie making 150k plus is not a failure. You can't call it a failure.
All right, let's get back to the listener questions. Troy has asked, if you're fielding 22 this week, would you be inclined to trade one of those 22 whose score is pretty much guaranteed to drop off for a player who's on the bye, if this can give you more players on field in rounds 14 or 15?
That's an interesting question because that's never really come across my mind, having 22 blokes all playing in the buy round. But I don't mind it. Like, I think the gap between 17 the gap between 17 and 18 is important. The gap between having 18 on field versus 19 is pretty important, because if you get an injured score of 10, that drops off. 19 to 20 is pretty important. I don't think it would make too much difference having 22 on field versus 21 on field. So I don't see any issues with it as long as you're confident that a certain player is going to play after this week. So I don't mind it if you're in that situation. I'm not in that luxurious position of thinking of having 22 players on field in a certain buy round. But full credit to you if you do. But I think I don't see the issue with that if you go with the right bloke.
Yeah, I think it would come down to who you're bringing in, and if you're totally confident that they will be there in a couple weeks' time when they're back playing. So when their team's back playing, so it depends who you're bringing in. But if you've got that luxury and can make that trade, then I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. A cheaper option that people are looking to bring in is Christian Salem. And Tim, same guy from earlier, has asked another question. Is Christian Salem worth a look as a D7 M9 swing? Almost a straight swap from Closey. So Clarky is obviously off sick, but he is our resident Melbourne supporter. And he's put a little note here on the run sheet for me to read out. He says, high risk, medium reward, relies heavily on quick, cheap possessions, but D's want to use him to move the ball due to his accuracy. Could have some 90 plus easily, but mixed in with some stinkers.
Yeah, I think this is a bloke that certainly has to be a D7 M9 sort of a bloke, unless your cash generation is that bad. Your cash generation might be under 13 million, which there might become the case where you might have to look at a guy like him. But one stat I'll bring up, because there was as I was saying to you off air, there was a 20-minute period where I was actually really considering it after I saw the Joe Richards news. So I was looking it up. Usually with Christian Salem, there is, so there's a start of the season injury. So that's been happening the past 3 years. I think 2022 he got injured for that Dogs game. 2023 missed the start of the season for a fair bit. And then 2024 he missed about a month. I forgot what the injury was. But I think I looked it up, and since 2018, post-bye round, he's only missed one game after the post-bye. And that was in 2022, round 24 against the Lions. So take that for what you will. And that's not including 2020, because that was a interesting year. So, anyway, is he a good pick or not? Team dependent. Do you want him as a D7 M9? Certainly, Blake, you don't want to have in your best 22 in the run home. I don't see a massive issue with it, but I think it's just a bit too risky for mine. Maybe something to swing for the fences a bit, and people are looking at that option because of the lack of rookies, and maybe they're looking at blokes like trading a Closey to get to a Salem, but I don't mind it. Probably not for me. Probably not the way I try to play the game, but I don't see an issue either way, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a way to bring him in, I have no issue with it, but I wouldn't trade anyone that you're comfortable having on field for him. Like, there is we have 3 trades that we can use during the buy rounds. I think that's a very important um thing to highlight, because there are rookies who have only made 60 to 80K on their starting price, and you could possibly put 3 together to get Salem plus 2 123K or less priced rookies, and then Salem is literally just taking a bench spot and being able to loop and be looped on, which, to be honest, isn't a bad isn't a bad way to look at it, because then you can use, I don't know, Zach Reed. I'll just use him as an example. I mentioned I have him earlier. You can use Zach Reed to loop Christian Salem with whoever you've got at D6. Like, there is situations where Christian Salem coming in makes a lot of sense because of what he can produce. But then you get situations where you're trading, where people are looking at trading a Harry Sheasel for Christian Salem and another guy that's bottomed out to about 400K. It's like, no.
No, don't do that.
I thought Harry Sheasel was going to tank in the midfield. It's taken him 2 games, less than 2 games, because he was shafted in the first quarter in that game against Essendon. 2 games to get back to his 110 plus scores. So I think Cheesel's fine. Don't move him on, but that's not the question. Christian Salem worth a look as a D7 M9 swing.
Yep.
That is what all you're bringing him in for, and mentions here, it's almost a straight swap from Closey. If Closey is your current D7 M9 swing and Christian Salem is coming in to that position, is it an upgrade? Probably. But if Closey is coming off field for you to get Christian Salem, and then Christian Salem eventually becomes a D7 M9 swing, I don't know if that is better than what Closey is producing now, especially from a trading point of view, and the fact that trades are so important the more the year progresses. So I think it depends on your team, and without being able to see it, unfortunately, we have to leave you with a maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking to replace a Closey with like a Salem, I feel like Closey won't be too that far off Salem's average from here on in. So because Closey can have those spike scores, as we've seen. So is it really worth the trade? Are you really gaining that many more points with doing it closer to Salem. Maybe you do, and maybe Salem takes it to another level. But
Yeah.
I'm just not sure if it's worth the trade if you're looking at that. But as you brought up, if you're getting rid of a couple of blokes off your bench, and then you have the mindset of Salem's going to be a bloke that can help me throughout the buys. My round 14 buy is looking good. He can help me throughout the buys, and then heading out of the buys, he'll be my D7 M9. Then I don't see it as a bad move.
Hopefully we answered your question, Tim, and didn't make it too confusing for you. Next question comes from SuperCoach Crazy. Is it too late to get Zach Fisher in after his bye, or do I get Dan Houston instead now due to the extra game before his bye? So this is how I feel about it. Okay, sorry to interject
No,
because
no, go for it, mate.
I have thoughts immediately with this. You get the same amount of games from Zach Fisher after his bye as you do from Dan Houston now. So Houston will play this week, have a week off, and then have 2 weeks where he scores. So that's 3 games of scores. Zach Fisher after his bye will give you 3 weeks of scores and be able to cover all of the other bye weeks.
Yep.
And give you 95 plus, let's say 90 plus comfortably each week. I don't think it's too late to get Zach Fisher in. And if you've got the money spare to do it now, I also see no issue with getting him in now as long as it doesn't mess up your buy structure.
Yeah, so that was sort of one thing myself I was considering was, do I get in Zach Fisher? I'm speaking myself from last week. Do I get Zach Fisher in now at 426k, or do I grab him after his bye? And I decided to go with the now because I was too nervous about how big of a price he would go up by. But I don't see any issue getting him in after his buy whatsoever. Like, he's still 495k, which I still think at the minute, with McKercher still out for the short term, medium term, not too sure about his progress. Sheasel being moved into the midfield, I don't see an issue with Zach Fisher in the medium term. So, and with how lackluster the forward line is after Heaney, Flanders, Zorko, I think a forward player like Fisher, I think that's a bigger priority for me. And you're getting him after his bye, and Houston will still. I should have double checked his break even, but I still believe after his bye, which is who I'm targeting after his bye, will still be at a good price. So I would personally think you'd wait for Fisher next week, and I don't see an issue with it instead of going Houston.
Some things to think about for you there, SC Crazy. Next question comes from our Google form, link on our website if you don't have social media. So once again, if you don't give us your name, the Google form doesn't supply it. So this is an anonymous question. I'm shopping for a big dog to finalize my last midfield spot. Who ends the year the best? Raul, Merritt, or Neil?
Or Neil, did you say?
Yeah, Lockie Neil.
Ooh. I'm still going to go Merritt. I think. I would still, if I had to choose between the three, I'd go Merritt. I think he'll probably average the most from here out of those three. Damo?
I own 2 and potentially will own all 3 by the end of the buy rounds. We've seen the Suns taper off in the second half of the season before, and this is where Damien Hardwick will really start to get tested with the Suns team to make sure that they keep this form up that they've got for the whole season. Because if they keep this form up, there's every chance that they play finals for the first time in their history. So that's something that will be talked about a lot as the season progresses, especially if they do taper off at all. Essendon have a chance to get into the finals and finally win one. And so that's something that will mean that team has a little bit extra hunger. That will be something that Brad Scott's really drilling into them. But then you got Brisbane wanting to fight to get back into finals contention after not really having the start to the year that they want. And it's still not impossible for them to get into the finals, but they have to have a big second half to the season. And Neil doesn't have a bye to deal with after this week. For me, from this round forward, Neil for total points, but Merritt for average.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, I don't think, for what it's worth, I don't think you can go wrong with either. Does seem like the Suns midfielders tapered off just a tad at the minute. I was noticing that, and we can certainly see Rao's form over the last month has certainly dipped a tad, and I think the Suns have got a pretty no, not hard, but it's not an ideal matchup with the teams in the midfield for the run home, from what I've noticed. So, and then Merritt, I think, is going to be one of those type of players where against the easier teams, he'll want the younger blokes. He's the captain. He'll want the younger blokes to get some exposure, that sort of thing. But when he's going, the next month's going to be pretty interesting for Essendon. They've got some really a lot harder opponents compared to Richmond, West Coast, and North, where he'll want to stamp his authority. All right, I need to lead this team forward, and we need to keep winning games. And I think we've seen Merritt being a little bit unselfish recently, and just let the load go to the other players in the midfield, like Durham and that sort of thing, Perkins, you name it. So but I do think at the end of the day, when the whips are cracking, I think Zach Merritt will stand up and will certainly, and has the capabilities of going 125 plus. And we don't have to worry about durability as well with Merritt. He seems to be a bloke that you can back in every week to play. So, I'm going to say Merritt for average and Neil for total points.
And last question comes straight from Clarky's sick bed. It says, "Excuse me, long-time host, first-time listener. How much cash should you be banking over the buys? How do I stop the curse that is plaguing my team? Do I need a shaman?" Well, let's start with that last question. I don't think Cooper Sharman will help your team, so don't bring him in. How do I stop the curse that is plaguing my team? If you find out, can you let me know? Because I'm plummeting at record pace.
Yeah, that'd be great, Clarky.
And how much cash should you be banking over the buys? Well, I don't think it's about banking cash. I think it's about making sure your team is as complete as possible by the end of it. So if you come out of it with full primo, cover on your bench, and 10K in the bank, I don't think that's an awful spot to be in. But obviously, the more cash you have, the more options you have to you if someone does go down with the trades you have left over. But again, if you've got full primo and cover on your bench, then having to trade players might not be something that you need to do straight off the bat anyway, and you can bank a little bit of cash before you have to make that move, should you have to make that move. So how much cash should be making over the buys, be banking over the buys? Team dependent, but over the buys, because you've got 3 trades each week, perfect time to try and complete your team.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's a mammoth thing to worry too much about. Obviously, the more the merrier in terms of banked in cash, of course. But as you said, we got 3 trades each week. We can certainly find our way around it. So I don't think it's something I'm personally going to be worrying too much about. Just following my theory and that sort of thing. And obviously, you want to try to get as best value as you can, finish off the side as quick as you can. I guess a question for you, Damo, is when you post buy rounds, how many trades would you look to have, and do you hold a lot of merit in having cash banked post buy if a player went down and that sort of thing?
I think the amount of cash banked is actually tied a lot to the amount of trades you have left over.
Yeah.
So if you come out of the buys with 5 trades and 50k, that's probably the minimum that you want for having those little trades left. If you come out of the buys complete team with 8 trades and 80k, you're set. You are completely set. If you come out of the buys with 2 trades somehow, and 2k in the bank, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I think the amount of cash you have left in the bank after the buys and the amount of trades that you have left can go hand in hand.
Very much so, yeah. Because certainly, you look at certain team situations. A lot of people are going to have a lot of different ideas on. Some people are going to have 22 primos, not much coverage, but they've got 5-6 trades with a bit of money in the bank where, all right, a player gets suspended, I can replace it with who I want, that sort of thing. It's going to be people with 23, 24 primos, all the loops in the world, but maybe down to like a 3-2 trades. So there's a lot of different avenues you can go down. And as you said, if you've got 8 trades with 80k in the bank, you're in a great spot. And yeah, probably people trying to win Supercoach this year will be in a situation like that. So it's very dependent on what strategy you've gone for this year and what decisions you've made.
All right, those are all of the questions this week. Just a reminder to our listeners, on Thursday mornings we will post our weekly traffic lights. So we'll grade some players each week they will either be awarded a green, yellow, or a red rating. Green indicates a good pick, yellow is a watch or hold, red is a trade or avoid. A player could earn their rating for several reasons, including but not limited to scoring potential, job security, price point, reliability, or injury status. So keep a lookout Thursday mornings for our traffic lights on our socials. They'll be posted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you need a hand with your trades this week. Being a buy round, we might have a compressed version just given what is out there and available to people, but there will be some form of traffic lights this week. Almost at the end of the podcast, Stephen, but we need to close out with our round 12 vice captains and captains for the week. Who are you looking at putting the VC on?
Now, first off, I'd like to say I actually think it's actually a pretty tough week to nail. So I do recommend if you can get a 115 plus score out of your vice captain, I do think you take it, because I don't think there's ideal matchups this week compared to previous weeks. So I think the key every week is just to get a decent score every week. But in saying that, I think Friday night, I'm looking at that Dogs Pies game, and I'm looking at a couple of blokes. I think Bond could go all right. We know how safe he is more often than not. But I'm going to go with Nick Dacos as my vice captain. I think he's played one game at Marvel this year, but that was against West Coast. I think he went pretty well against the Dogs last year from memory, but I'm pretty sure he had a very nice score there. And I think Nick Dacos is just a bloke that we're not really considering too much because everyone has him. It's sort of afterthoughts about him, but I do really like Dacos with that matchup against the Dogs. And my captain, it's a bit tough to nail, but I am probably going to go with Caleb Sarong, your man. So I'm looking at him. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure Freo have never played in Alice Springs, to be honest. So hard to say how that would go. But I do like Sarong. I'm just going to back in one of the best players in Supercoach this year, and I do just going to go with that and hope just for a 110 plus sort of score. Damo, who are you thinking about?
I'm with you with Nick Dacos as my VC. I think up against the Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium, there's every chance that he completely goes off the chain. But as you say, Marcus Bontempelli against essentially no one could also go pretty big. But I know that Collingwood have been pretty restrictive for midfielders this season. And captaincy, I've stuck it on Max Gawn just because, Max Gawn is Max Gawn and does what Max Gawn does. And I don't know how the game's going to play out at Alice Springs because it's going to be wet and steamy. So does that suit Max Gawn or does that suit Caleb Sarong? I don't really know.
We don't have much data, unfortunately, Damo. So it's a
Yeah.
bit hard to gauge.
I also really like Zach Merritt against the Suns on Sunday in that last game, but I hate relying on the last game of the round for my captaincy
Oh,
score.
it's the worst, isn't it? I've done it a couple of times. I can't stand it. It basically rides on your whole week.
Yeah. So I've got it on Max score and that feels safe. It feels like worst case scenario I'll get a 110 from him and I'd take that in this kind of week where matchups aren't really our friend. Other options that you have available to you is Jordan Dawson against the Hawks is a good shout potentially. There are some people putting the VC on Jeremy McGovern against St Kilda.
I like it.
That's a massive pod there. And Geelong face the Richmond at GMHBA Stadium. And I wouldn't put a captaincy on him, but if anyone owns Max Holmes, I would strongly consider him as a VC option as well, because you've got obviously Gawn, Sarong, even Luke Ryan and Zach Merritt, Matt Rowell the next day that you could fall back on if need be. So those are some other options for you there.
And I don't mind. I don't. It's just the only thing is I don't know which way it would go, but I don't mind if you're very confident on Nick Dacos. I don't mind if you have a crack at Zach Butters. We know how good of a player he is on the Friday night, because if you see the centre bounce and maybe Hewitt has gone to Horn Francis, that could open up Butters' game. So with no Rosie as well, so I don't mind that either. But I'm going to go with Dacos and Sarong.
And that's it for this episode of the Footy Mailbag. Thank you, Stephen. Where can people find you?
Thank you very much, Damo. Thank you for all the questions that were sent through. And I hope get better, Clarky. Thank you for having me on. So you can find me at Stephen D.W. Smith on Twitter. Did a fan cast episode yesterday in Melbourne with Coach Cole. So make sure you check that out on Spotify or YouTube. And then on YouTube, my channel, SDS SuperCoach. So it's been really good fun doing content. And thank you very much for having me on here, Damo.
Clarky, I know you'll be listening. Rest up, get well soon, and we'll welcome you back next week. And I know my team and your team go head to head this weekend, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of bragging rights next week from one of us. Just don't get too upset when Freo wins against your mob. It's just a tradition. Justin Longmuir seems to beat them around this time of year, no matter where they are or what sort of conditions. So
I'm nearly backing you in this weekend. I don't mind Freya's chances.
Yeah, I really have no idea. They need to play for 4 quarters, which they are struggling to do at the moment.
Yep.
If you haven't given us a rating on your listening platform of choice, please do so. It helps new listeners find us. Make sure to check out SuperCoach rings at supercoachchampion.com for a Super Bowl style ring for your league winner, and make sure to visit our brand new website, thefootymailbag.net. Head over there for links to our social medias, our t-shirt if you want to buy it, and our Google form for our listeners who don't have social media and want to get involved. That is thefootymailbag.net. That's the website. Head over there, take a look. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk next time.